overwhelmed and overjoyed by the incredible news that 15-year-old Elizabeth Smart was found and that she's safe and back home with her family in Salt Lake City. But a lot of people want to know what really happened to that young girl. What did she experience? Did she try to escape? And was she really brainwashed by her alleged abductors?
It's real. It's real. God lives. He is there. He answers prayers. And the prayers of the world have brought Elizabeth home.
Elizabeth Smart, the 15-year-old girl that was abducted by knife point from her bedroom 9 months ago, was miraculously found alive in Sandy, Utah, just 15 miles from her home. Elizabeth's incredible reunion with her family was joyous, but some have questioned why it appeared she hadn't tried to run away from her captors.
If she had wanted to speak out, there were a number of people here, and people had gone up to ask her if she was okay.
She even seemed reluctant to admit her identity to the police when questioned.
She says, I know who you guys think I am, but I'm not that person.
Why hadn't Elizabeth spoken out? Had she been brainwashed? Hattie Hurst, a victim of kidnapping, shed some light on these questions.
She was taken at knife point. She was obviously tortured. I mean, you don't get somebody to succumb to your will without subjecting them to, if not physical, surely emotional torture.
Hattie Hurst was kidnapped at gunpoint by the radical Symbionese Liberation Army in 1974 and was held captive for 2 years. Hurst told Matt Lauer on NBC's Today Show why she thinks Elizabeth couldn't just walk away.
She believed that he had absolute power, and that is what happens. You just give in to someone else's will. You give up your own will in order to survive. Your mind just goes on an autopilot of day-to-day survival.
Now, Carrie and Jody know what it's like to be the victim of mind control. At 19, Carrie met a man who eventually brainwashed her and convinced her to cut ties with her friends and family. Now, when Jody was just 11, he was abducted by his karate instructor, whom he says gained his trust and used it against him. Jody, I'm glad you're here. We've known each other for years, and yours is an incredible, amazing story. And before we get talking about Elizabeth Smart and brainwashing, can you just tell this audience a little bit about what happened to you?
Okay, when I was 11 years old, 10, 11 years old, I'd begun taking karate, and after about a year, he was facing charges, and he decided to skip town. But when he skipped town, he took me with him to eventually to Anaheim, California, and then he was arrested. It was about 2 weeks later, and eventually, after he was captured, he was being returned back home to Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and my father shot and killed him.
It's just an incredible story, and over the years, it's just amazed me at how well you've dealt with it. I mean, not only being abducted and abused by a trusted, authority figure, but the fact that on the extradition back into Louisiana, your own father kills the guy. And I think, personally, I have to say it, I think you're a remarkable young man to come out of this as well as you have, and well, I'm proud to have you here. Let me just ask you, from your own personal experience of that time you were with the karate instructor, what are your personal thoughts about Elizabeth Smart?
My personal thought is it was almost reversed, where in my situation, I knew the person that had taken me for a year and then he abducted me. It was the reverse with Elizabeth, because she was abducted and then she got to know, over 9 months, she got to know this person. While we were sitting at home thinking this monster had her and no telling what he did with her, she got to see a different side of him, something that, she probably connected with in some way.
Well, the report, and I talked to the cops, said that she wouldn't admit who she was when they caught him and his bizarre wife, and they separated them. She wouldn't tell them who she really was, and that she was kind of upset or concerned about what was going to happen to them. What do you think about that?
Whenever my father shot and killed the guy who had kidnapped me, I got upset because he was dead. I was angry at what my father did. So for her to have feelings like that, I mean, I can totally understand 100%. And I've heard people say, well, why didn't she run away? I had the opportunity, when I was kidnapped, on my kidnapping, I went to Disneyland. I spent the whole day in Disneyland. I could have went up to security. I didn't say anything. One day he went out to look for a job. I was left in the hotel room, or the motel room, for probably 8 hours, and I didn't call my mom. I didn't, run away. I didn't do it either.
And is that because you were brainwashed, or you were just trying to survive, or you were just afraid you'd get caught trying to escape?
Probably a combination of everything. I think when people are victimized, they do what they have to do to survive. If I had to say the one thing that Elizabeth Smart did was she got home safe. So to question anything that she did while she was gone is wrong, because she's home safe.
Boy, I agree with you totally. I mean, it's wonderful attitude that you have about that, and you're strong enough to say it, because I'm saying that this guy could have got sick with her. She was only 15 years old and killed her and left her in the desert. She had to do what she had to do to stay alive.
She goes to the party where she's got the veil on, and I saw someone saying that, oh, well, she could have went to anyone in that party. Remember the situation where the guy ran from Jeffrey Dahmer to the police? And the police took him back to Jeffrey Dahmer?
Who killed him?
How did she not know? I mean, she had seen the people, or she had seen him manipulate the police in Las Vegas a couple days earlier, so she believed that this guy could talk his way out of anything. So of course she's going to go, and of course she's not going to say anything until she felt safe. Once she felt safe, then, look at her now. She's out, and she's showing them where they, the holes that they were dug into, right, the helicopters. So now she's, from what I understand, cooperating.
Oh yeah, she is, and she's doing very well, and you make a great point that it probably destroyed her when the cops stopped the three of them, and this guy talked his way out of it. And one of the family members told me at one point she got up the courage to go to a woman and say very quietly, because they watched her 24 hours a day, unlike your abductor, they were close to her. She got a little bit away and said, I'm Elizabeth Smart, and it was the only woman in America who didn't know what Elizabeth Smart was, and said, who are you, what is it? And so then she must have felt crushed.
And that could have potentially gotten her killed. So the fact that she's home safe and alive, Elizabeth, you did exactly everything perfect.
Well, I'm so glad that you're doing the work you're doing, because you're really helping a lot of people out there who have been through tough things like yourself. Now, Carrie, you say you were subjected to mind control also by someone that you met when you were 19, was it?
Yes.
Okay. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
When I went to college, I met a man who was a very charismatic individual. He was on a mission for God, and that appealed to me. I was raised in a Christian family, and I was at a time in my life where it was a transitive period in my life in college, and I was kind of at a crossroads, and I decided to start meeting with this man for prayer. We would pray 5 hours every morning. We wake up at 5 o'clock every morning and pray before school, and then that's how it began. So it began very benign, seemingly, but the thing about my leader, as well as Elizabeth, Emmanuel, is that they're so deceptive to the people who they're closest to and to the world. The people who knew my leader would never have thought he did the things that he did to us. The kind of abuse.
It's such a contradiction, because the guy who brainwashed you and this Emmanuel who did some horrible things, but yet he's out there preaching the word. He's a prophet. He's talking about God and being gentle and benevolent, but they're really, really double agents, aren't they?
Yeah, they really are. Yes.
Well, we're going to get into some of the things that went on while you were in his grip, and how you finally got out of it, which I think is really fascinating. So later on, we're going to talk to the man who helped Carrie regain her identity and get her back on track. He's going to tell us what may lie ahead for 15-year-old Elizabeth Smart. But up next, we're going to continue with Carrie and Jody, so stay with us. We'll be right back.
Troy basically says, you're not telling us the truth. Who are you? Nope. I'm Augustine Marshall. We went on with this for time after time after time. 6, 7 times myself, I asked her, what's your name? I finally sent another officer down to the department, which is only 2 blocks from the location, to get a flyer of Elizabeth. The flyer came and compared it right next to her and said...
Held it right up
right next to her face. Me and Troy looked at each other and says, it's a match.
She said, I have to be on this mission for the rest of my life with this man. And we were shocked. I could see that she was changing into a different person. And when I met with her after she got off the plane from the trip, she was not my daughter.
In light of the remarkable recovery of Elizabeth Smart, there are many questions about what she really endured during those long 9 months, allegedly with a man who brainwashed her. Now, Jody was kidnapped and a victim of mind control, and he was just 11. Carrie was brainwashed when she was 19 by a religious fanatic she met at college. Now, Carrie, before the break, you were talking about you're in college, it's benign, you meet this guy, and you start to pray with him. And so you're not, you weren't kidnapped, you weren't 15 years old, and you weren't 11 years old. How did this guy get a hold of you?
He started by cutting me off from my family, from my friends. In the very beginning, he screened our phone calls. We would have to speak on speakerphone, and he would be in the same room coaching us what to say. Tell your parents they were terrible parents, that they're controlling, that you need to be on your own now. So he was controlling of everything. He isolated us from our family and from our friends. We lived in a basement. We slept on the floor. We all ate together. He started starving us. So I was less than 90 pounds. So it evolved into that. There were physical beatings. There was a lot of abuse and torture, a lot of sleep deprivation. So
basically what lots of countries have done to soldiers, prisoners of
Yes.
war, to break down their spirit, break down their resolve,
Exactly.
and to manipulate them into doing whatever they wanted to do.
Yes.
So that's basically what he did to you. Beatings, torture, starving you,
Yeah.
all that type of stuff. Did you try to escape?
I was with him for a year before I even thought of escaping. I didn't even realize that there was a world out there. I had lost touch with reality so much that he changed our names. I was Lily in the group, and that was my name, that was my identity. And so the first time that I thought about leaving was I was being abused, and I looked outside and I said, I want to be on that grass in one of those cars with the outside world. There's another world out there. And that was the first time that I ran away.
Where did you go when you ran away?
I was homeless for a week. I ran away 4 times. And the first time I actually went home, he followed me to the airport and tried to keep me from going home. So the other times I was homeless, I had plenty of opportunity to tell people who I was, but I didn't understand what I was going through. My mind was so shot.
Now, when you get home, this is something this audience is going to have a tough time grasping. He's kidnapped and he's recovered by police. Elizabeth Smart's kidnapped, recovered by police. You go home. How did he lure you back away from your home when you're home safe?
There's so much fear involved. I can relate to what Elizabeth probably went through. Her whole mindset is changed around, so she reveres this leader and everyone else is the enemy. So when I went home, my family was the enemy, and they were trying to pull me away from the mission of God. And I would be on email constantly with him, and he would just use guilt and manipulation. You're leaving your calling, you're abandoning this mission that we're called for.
So in spite of what he did to you, you get home to this loving family who's willing to do anything to keep you there. Their daughter, I would. I have a 20-year-old daughter in college, and I know I would do anything if she was in your situation. But you're still having contact with him, and he's still manipulating you.
Exactly.
And you actually go back 3 times?
Yes.
3 times. 3 times you go there, you can't take it anymore, and you come back.
Right.
But obviously, you're very confused during all this time.
Yes.
Did your parents ever think of calling the police and having him arrested, or why wasn't he arrested? Because he didn't kidnap you? You went voluntarily?
Right. It was voluntarily. I was older than 18. They had seen scars on my face when I came home, but I lied about everything. I didn't tell them anything that was going on with him. He would put up a front for the whole world to see. So they didn't know that the abuse was going on until I told my story.
What about there were other people with you?
Correct.
How many?
3 other males.
3 other
3
males. And they were college students?
Correct, yeah.
And they had been also brainwashed and manipulated
Yes.
to be under the spell or whatever you call this thing, the bizarre thing these people do. Did they ever try to get away?
One of them did, and he was in such a physically harmed and abused and mangled his body that he just fell asleep. He just collapsed somewhere. So he didn't even make it anywhere. He was being forced to sleep in the car at that point, not allowed to go to the bathroom. It became very physically abusive for him. So he ran away the same day that I ran the last time.
But he didn't make it.
He did make it the last day that I ran away. So he had tried one time previous.
So he's out.
He's out.
He's out of this manipulation.
Yes.
Is this guy still around?
Yes, he is.
He's still around.
Yes.
And are the two guys that didn't, that two are left?
Yes.
Are they still with him?
They are, yes.
Trying to recruit new people?
Yes.
They're trying, have they been successful?
Not so far.
Not so far. But they're still there. They think they're on this,
Right.
they're on this deluded mission from God.
Right.
They are. And what would you say to them?
I think that the key for them to understand is that there are people out there who care about them and who love them and who are knowledgeable about this, who understand brainwashing, to tell them, you know, you're a victim, you need to be rescued, and I don't expect you to run away on your own because you don't even have it in your mindset to know that you can run away. So I think the critical thing is to separate them from the leader and to support them with loving family members. And
Do you want to say something, Jim?
Yeah, I was talking with my mother, and one of the things that we both felt that had to be said is the people at her work were saying, well, why didn't she leave? They were asking the same question that everybody on TV is asking. And our thought to them, the people who don't know and can't understand, is if you don't know, if you don't understand why she stayed and didn't rat him out, be thankful because you've never been in that situation. You know, you've never been that scared. You've never been that fearful. So if you don't understand, be happy.
Don't make a judgment. And
Yes.
don't, unless you, I always say this, don't judge somebody unless you've walked in their shoes, truly. Now, let me ask you, before we go to break, do you think this guy belongs in jail? Abused you? Starved you?
yes, definitely.
Belongs in jail.
Yes, so he can't. So he doesn't have the opportunity to victimize other people, and so he can pay for what he's done.
I know you're in a treatment program. We're going to talk about, your mom's going to come out here. If police came to you now and said, we've got some evidence of abuse from other, you know, the other guy who got away, etc., do you think in the mindset you are now that you'd cooperate if they said, look, we need you to help put this guy in jail?
Yes.
You do?
Definitely, yeah.
Well, God bless you. Good for you. Okay, later, we'll tell you what you need to know about the dangers of mind control and how you can avoid becoming a victim. Coming up, Carrie's mother was very instrumental in her escape and recovery. She'll join us when we come back. Stay with us.
On the next John Walsh Show, he was falsely accused of mass murder.
She was going around saying, I'm going to get the $100,000 reward.
Sarah was only 10 when she was accused of molesting a child.
You're sitting there going, what's a pedophile?
Under a cloud of suspicion on the next John Walsh Show.
We're talking about children who were victims of brainwashing and mind control, much like little Elizabeth Smart, who is believed to have been brainwashed by the man who allegedly abducted her and ran off with her for 9 months. Now, Debbie is Carrie's mother, and I can only imagine the hell she endured while her daughter was slipping away. Debbie, thanks for being here. I think it's such an important message, and I know it'd be easy for you to say, look, I'd love to have this past me and forget about it, but it happens all the time. I think it's so important. When did you first realize that your beautiful college daughter was slipping away?
Carrie was very fervent to be in this missionary trip with this gentleman. This
I
gentleman.
wouldn't call him a gentleman.
Well,
This
at the
guy.
time.
Oh, at the time.
At the time that
This
we were.
creep.
The family was convinced that he had credentials
Right.
and was appropriately leading these children on a mission trip. It was when they got back from the mission trip that I worried, because when I saw Carrie and she had been away for the summer, she had lost at least 30 pounds. And it was, when she smiled, her teeth were too big for her face, if you know that thin look.
She's not a big gal. 30 pounds is, I mean, she's a very petite young lady. 30 pounds is a pretty red flag, isn't it?
It is. It is. I burst out in tears when I saw her. And my daughter and I were with her, and she immediately said, "Mom, Bethany, I'm not going back to college." And we were shocked. She said, "I have to be on this mission for the rest of my life with this man." And I said, "Carrie, you can be a missionary without this man." "No, Mom, I am called to be with this man."
Did you suspect something? Did you say, gee, maybe it's a phase? I mean, what were you thinking now when she says, I'm not going to go back, I'm going to go with him, and you're thinking, how do I stop this? Or what did you think?
In the months that preceded the mission trip, I had gotten glimmers of questions and skepticism on what was going on. And even when the mission trip was going on, the emails that I was receiving from Carrie, I could only call Lily at the time, were not written from her. I knew they weren't. They weren't her expression. And so I could see that she was changing into a different person. And when I met with her after she got off the plane from the trip, she was not my daughter.
So under the guise of religion, under the guise of spreading the gospel, this guy is manipulating and abusing your daughter and using religion as the cover, basically the cover.
Right.
So how did she break ties?
It was a long time. She was in the group exactly 18 months. That's a long time. And it was a year today that she had run away for the 4th time. She was living homeless in a city, eating ketchup packets in a hospital, and called me and said, I am out of money, I need something. She didn't want to come home because home was not a safe place. We were the enemy still. She didn't want to go back there because she was being abused. So I had a connection of someone in the area. She went to their house, and I finally, after phone call, convinced her to come home, and I went and got her and brought her home.
Now, I'm absolutely mesmerized, as this audience is, that she ran away 3 times before you finally got her back. Seeing her come back must have been euphoric, knowing that there was a long road. But seeing her leave must have been hell.
It was surreal. And when she was home, she was not herself, to the point where I was a wreck. I felt like I had to be a policeman on duty, seeing if she was really asleep all night, checking her during the night. Would she run away? And when she ran away, it was right after we had had a discussion about trust. And I said, Carrie, can I trust you? And she said, yes, I'm not going back. And I went into the room and she was gone.
Didn't it drive you crazy? I'm sure you had this conversation because you are a loving mother. And I'm sure you held her and hugged her and said, I love you so much that this is breaking my heart. And you can't continue this life. I know something's terribly wrong here.
You must have been there because that's what I said.
I know it. I know, because that's what I would say. But it must have driven you crazy. What did she say back to you?
Mom, don't ask any questions. She would say, I'm the happiest I've been in my whole life. I know what my mission is. And there could be no greater joy.
And you must have said to her, this guy is not a representative of the God we know, the God you grew up with. He can't be. If he's doing this to you, he cannot be a representative of God.
That's a fine line, John, because I did not want to alienate her.
Mm-hmm.
She knew if she said that, I would leave. Because I had been so brainwashed to think this is the only Christian, this is the only true Christian. And so it really took the education that we received from Steve Hassan, actually, to learn about what is mind control, because it's a deeper issue than religion, or than just having a man claim to be a prophet of God who's really abusing people.
So you had to walk that tightrope. But the man you mentioned, Steve, we're going to meet. When we come back, we're going to meet this guy who's responsible for Carrie's incredible recovery. Stay with us. We'll be right back. People are comparing the case of Elizabeth Smart to that of Patty Hearst, who was abducted against her will and then became the victim of mind control. Now, a lot of people believe that Elizabeth Smart was also brainwashed. Now, when I was in Salt Lake City after Elizabeth had been recovered, I spoke with 2 of the officers who responded to the calls when Elizabeth had been spotted. Watch this.
We look at each other and something's not right. We check her data banks, nothing adds up. She doesn't exist with this information. So Troy basically says, "You're not telling us the truth. Who are you?" "Nope, I'm Augustine Marshall." We went on with this for time after time after time. 6, 7 times myself I asked her, "What's your name?" I finally sent another officer down to the department, which is only 2 blocks from the location, to get a flyer of Elizabeth. The flyer came and compared it right next to her and said...
Held it right up
next
to her face.
Me and Troy looked at each other and says, "It's a match."
Now, I got to say, those Sandy, Utah cops, 4 of them responded, are real heroes, because this creep had been stopped by police in Las Vegas, and he had talked his way out of it. But these cops said, we know something's up here. They held him, sent another police officer back down to the police department, and got pictures of him, the wanted picture, and pictures of Elizabeth Smart. And I really think they saved their lives. Now, Steve Hassan was a victim of brainwashing more than 26 years ago. He's the author who has written a book called Releasing the Bonds, and now he helps other victims of brainwashing, including Carrie. Now, Steve, thanks for being here today.
I'm so glad you're doing this show, John.
Well, I think it's so important, and you have helped so many people.
My family rescued me, and I've spent the last 26 years helping others to get out. The key thing is that any intelligent, educated person under the right set of circumstances can be isolated, their identity can be disoriented, hypnosis, sleep deprivation, privacy deprivation, phobias put in their mind, members are taught thought stopping, and essentially a new identity is created, what as a mental health professional calls a dissociative disorder. So, for example, we have the Elizabeth Smart, but now we have Augustine, who's now been programmed to believe Emmanuel is a prophet of God, or Carrie was programmed to believe this guy was a prophet of God. And you have no ability to be in touch with the resources you had growing up.
And I've got to say, she was from a very loving family, wonderful people, religious. They're Mormons, and they have a deep religious ethic. And
Carrie came from an Orthodox Christian family, very loving.
Right.
I come from a Jewish family, very loving.
Right.
It really doesn't matter about the background. What matters is that social psychology, the use of indoctrination techniques are real. And that the good news is that people want to be free. The human spirit wants love and truth. But it takes a very specialized kind of approach to get past the indoctrination to the real core self, get past the phobias, and get the person to start reality testing.
What bothers me so much is the people in the media that are speculating, why didn't she try to get away? And I think Jody hit the nail on the head when here's a guy that was kidnapped. Right. And said, I was left alone. Now, I know for a fact Elizabeth was never left alone. Mm-hmm. And I heard that she had actually gone up to a woman one time and said, I'm Elizabeth Smart, and this woman was the only woman in America that didn't know she was missing. So, and then when the Las Vegas police let them go, she had to be heartbroken, etc. Mm-hmm. Okay, so why didn't she try harder to get away?
Because the identity that was indoctrinated into her was totally dependent. There was no ability to reality test. When you're in a mind control cult, you're not allowed to think negative thoughts. You're told it's Satan or it's evil spirits. You're not allowed to imagine an alternate reality other than being with the group and the leader.
And she could have been very scared. I mean, here's a guy that kidnapped her from her own bedroom at knife point.
Absolutely.
Who probably said all along the way, I can kill you if you do anything, or I can go back in your house and get your 9-year-old sister or whatever.
And I'm sure he physically abused her. He probably physically abused Wanda, his wife, who was also probably a model of abuse.
I love what Jody said. Jody said, in a way, she's a hero. She did what she had to do to survive.
Absolutely.
Okay? Now, what did you do to help Carrie?
First of all, the family contacted me, and I do a preparation with the family to teach them about mind control, to teach them the last thing you want to do is attack the group directly, because it brings up all of the thought stopping and all the phobias. What you want to do is create rapport and trust, talk about other situations that are called mind control, describe control of behavior, information, thoughts, emotions, undo the phobias. I have a 3-step phobia cure that I've developed as well. and eventually get the person into an environment where I can meet with them, with typically former members of that group or a similar group, where we can have access and begin to help them to start reality testing again.
I got to tell you, looking at her sitting there with her mom, holding hands, after all that this mom has been through and all the abuse and brainwashing she's been through, I got to say you did a heck of a job.
Thank you.
Okay. Charges have been filed against Elizabeth Smart's alleged abductors. But what's next? What will she and her family need to do to get her life back on track? We're going to talk about that when we come back. Stay with us. Now we're talking about brainwashing and mind control. Now that Elizabeth Smart is safe and back home with her family, what's the next step? Well, psychologist Marta Weber says that whatever the Smart family does next could affect Elizabeth for years to come. Now, let me start with this, Marta. Everybody in the media is comparing this to Patty Hearst, that she was kidnapped and brainwashed, and I keep hearing this Stockholm Syndrome, Stockholm Syndrome. What the heck is the Stockholm Syndrome, and does it apply in the Elizabeth Smart case?
The Stockholm Syndrome refers to a case in Stockholm some years ago where bank employees were kept in a vault by their captors over a period of time. And these people actually formed an attachment with the people who had held them and retained that attachment after the episode was over. They identified with those people. They took up their cause. One woman actually formed a relationship with one of the robbers and captors.
Something like what would happen to Patty Hearst in a small way. But now I've seen the Smart family. Elizabeth is back home, very safe, right? What should the Smart family be doing now, other than telling the press to leave us alone?
Yeah, it's important for this girl's privacy to be protected. And the first thing that I would hope would happen is that they would have the benefit of the education of what she experienced and what they need to do to undo it. So some kind of intervention, I would hope, would take place so that she can first of all come to understand what she went through. She can't possibly understand it. Secondly, she needs a great deal of support. Thirdly,
that she's got.
Yes,
I've seen that.
yes,
She's got
and
a
that
huge
will continue,
family,
right.
but she's going to have to go through this brutal criminal justice system. And I've sat and watched 700 trials, and the criminal justice system, I call it the criminal injustice system. It's not there to take care of the victim. It's there to get a conviction, to get a win at any cost, and many times the victims are brutalized in the system.
Well, increasingly there are victim assistance programs attached to the criminal justice process, where I spent most of the last decade. And I would urge the family to insist that those services be available. But even before that, if Elizabeth gets the benefit of this intervention that we're talking about, then she can be prepared not only to go through the trial, but to return to normal life with an understanding of what she went through, with the support of the corrective emotional experience of some kind of therapeutic process, so that she's armed. Because when people approach her and ask questions like, why didn't you try to escape? That opens up the possibility of really being re-victimized in a small way, because she could be made to feel that she bears some responsibility, and in fact she bears none.
None whatsoever.
So that's very important.
I know they're doing all that. I know for sure they are. I'm going to take a couple questions for you here.
Hi, John. I have a question for Kate, for Katie's mom. I just want to know, the last 2 times that she was, you know, supposed to been going back home.
Yes.
How did she get back? I don't understand. How did you? Not
Very
saying it's your fault.
creatively.
Not saying it's your fault. It's not your fault at all. But how did she was allowed to go back? I don't understand. She's 19.
I know. How was she allowed to go back? Not allowed? She was afraid to tell me that she wanted to go back because she knew I didn't want that. I could see the abuse she was under. So she had to sneak away.
But when she went back, did she go to the college, or was he there at the college, or she went to his house, or?
We lived in a basement of his brother, in his brother's house. So I ran back to them and they picked me up. I was in constant communication with them when I got on the train. They paid for my train back, so that's how I got back.
Away.
And I
So
made sure not to tell my
Stephen,
family.
when did you get involved? On first coming home, second coming home? When did you get involved?
It was the third coming home.
Third coming home.
I had met with the family, started preparing them for a strategic approach to get her out, and then she just showed up at home, and it was like, oh boy.
Now you got your shot.
Now, because you need access in order to undo the information control.
What about these people that go in and kidnap their kids? What do you think?
I'm totally against the forcible abduction, and I don't like the word deprogramming. Why? Because it's traumatic. I went through that myself when I was being rescued by my family in 1976, but it's very traumatic. Plus, all the cults, it put phobias in members' minds that they're going to be kidnapped and beaten, tortured.
But what do you say to the people who say, boy, I wish I'd have gone and got my kid from David Koresh and the Branch Davidians, or I wish I'd have gotten my kid before Jim Jones got all of them to take poison down in Guyana?
What do I say to them? If it's a situation where you know they're going to die, then everything, the lesser of two evils reigns.
Yeah.
But I'm nervous that people are going to rush to do that first instead of seeking professional help and exhaust all the other possibilities.
Gotcha.
I'm interested in knowing from Stephen what the thought-stopping processes are and what thoughts trigger them to put those into place.
Essentially, the cult identity is told to be totally obedient and dependent on the leadership, and you're told that if a negative thought comes in, or a doubt, that it's evil spirits. And like Carrie said to her mom, I'm happier than I've ever been in my life. That's exactly what I said when I was in the cult, and that's what most of the clients that I help get out say, I'm happy. Why? Because you can't express that you're miserable, or you can't express you're homesick, or you want to sleep in a real bed, or
you're in trouble.
Or you're in trouble.
One
exactly.
quick question.
Yeah, Jody, I just wondered what's going on with your dad?
My dad, he got probation, and he still lives at home in Louisiana in Baton Rouge, and he likes to fish, and yeah, I still. Yes.
Yeah, it is. He chose that way, but I think you're a real man to say, look, he chose his path, he's still my dad, I still love him, and I forgive him for that. No matter what happened to Elizabeth Smart, the bottom line is that she's safe and back home with her loving family. When we come back, keeping children safe. That's up next. It's important information. Don't go away. I got to say, I'll remember it for the rest of my life. Getting that call that Elizabeth Smart was found alive was a moment I'll never, ever forget. And now that she's home, we know that she and her family got a lot of healing to do. And as today's brave guests and some wonderful experts have shown us, it's possible to have a healthy recovery. Now, I learned an awful lot myself today, and if you want more information on today's show, please log on to our website at johnwalsh.tv. Thanks a lot for watching. I always say it to you, please stay safe. We'll see you next time.